Hi, I'm Humberto da Silva. Welcome to the Syndicalista TV World News. Let's start where else? In the Middle East. The UN has authorized a no-fly zone over Libya. This has allowed NATO jets to prevent Libyan jets from utilizing the innovative riot control measure of strafing protesters. World leaders are singing a chorus for Muammar Gaddafi to step down. Gaddafi is understandably confused, as he was recently lauded for giving up his non-existent WMD program. Tony Blair, George Bush, and John McCain, among others, had all gushed praise for the reformed terrorist. Good thing for freedom-loving Libyans, their country has oil. In Yemen, authorities have learned from Libya that using heavy weapons against protesters can result in UN-NATO intervention. So instead, Yemeni police are using small arms to shoot protesters in the head from the tops of buildings. Yemen's government is actively promoting its internal al-Qaeda threat to justify suppression of protest. But because Yemen doesn't have much oil, don't expect any duty to protect type interventions anytime soon. In response to massive protest, Syrian dynastic President Bashar al-Assad is doing the dictator's dance and promising a slate of reforms. Like in Yemen, Syrian security forces have taken to shooting protesters in the head from rooftops. Internet and cell phone services are down. The Syrian uprising would normally be a huge story given Syria's antipathy towards Israel is second only to Iran's. But the Western media can only focus on one Arab country at a time, and Syria doesn't have much oil either. In Bahrain, Saudi troops armed and trained by the US have moved in to support the ruling royal family against more massive protests. Bahrain has lots of oil and hence merits intervention. But don't expect to hear any more about this on any channel except Al Jazeera. And if you live in the US, don't expect to hear any more about this at all. Now to the Far East. 11 million liters of radioactive water have been released into the Pacific Ocean from the Fukushima nuclear power plant in Japan. Tokyo's drinking water has been deemed unsafe for infants. Plutonium has been found in recently harvested food in Taiwan. Radioactive cesium has been found in California milk. Meanwhile, the Tokyo Electric Power Corporation wisely announced it would be scrapping the Fukushima reactors. In a Japanese version of the Toxic Asset Recovery Program, the Japanese government is considering nationalization of the radioactive Fukushima ruin. So let's move on to more Eurocentric news. Last week, over 300,000 rallied in London against government austerity measures. Despite the diversity of protesters, corporate media images showed only anarchists breaking windows. In a tribute to Egyptian protesters, students protesting huge tuition hikes sacked the headquarters of the ruling Tory party. Although massive, last weekend's London protests were one-off weekend events. It appears the lessons of Egypt have yet to sink in the West. It's not the action you are holding, it's the business you are holding up. The London protests fail to interfere with business as usual, as would be required to effect change. Portugal is due for shock treatment. A succession of governments bought used German submarines and bailed out the banks to the tune of gazillions of euros. Now, to cover the debt, the banks are lending the Portuguese government money at 8% after borrowing it from the European Central Bank at 1%. The only collateral needed to run this scam are bonds issued by the Portuguese government. After issuing these bonds and failing to pass an austerity budget, the ostensibly socialist Socrates government up and quit. Portuguese corporate media outlets report ad nauseum the need for reducing public services. One commonly targeted benefit is the 200 euros provided monthly to Roma who register their kids in school. As in London, the massive protest has not been sustained at the general strike level that enacted change in Egypt. Meanwhile, back in our hemisphere, in Puerto Rico in the past 4 months, over 10,000 students have been forced to quit university due to massive tuition increases. The neoliberal attack on public education is being subtly played out in the colony's main university, which has been transformed into a military camp reminiscent of Kent State. Riot police and agents provocateurs have been acting with impunity against protesting students. Oh, in case anyone has silly notions of taking legal action over these tactics, the right-wing government has decertified the island's Bar Association, silencing the entire legal community in one stroke. Public education is also under attack in Honduras. The neoliberal dictatorship elected after the coup d'etat has set the stage for the privatization of the education system. The government is firing thousands of education workers and outlawing their unions. Tens of thousands are marching in protest, but these protesters will not get their own way. More independent journalists are killed in Honduras than anywhere else in the world. Without cameras rolling, the repression has been free-flowing. In response to the brutality, the Obama administration has increased aid to efforts by Honduran law enforcement. For its part, the Harper government is responding by fast-tracking a free trade agreement with the Honduran regime. So finally, let's bring it back home. Toronto Transit Commission workers have been deprived of the right to legally strike. The Ontario Provincial Legislature did the deed on behalf of Toronto's millionaire mayor, Rob Ford. The legislation came after a sustained corporate media attack against TTC workers. These workers had this fundamental human right stripped, although they had struck for an average of less than 16 hours per year since the TTC was established. TTC unions report that moments after they lost their right to strike, the TTC ceased giving a rat's ass about their employees' grievances or health and safety concerns. So that's your Global Week. I'm Humberto da Silva for Sindicalista TV, reminding you, rise up now or shut up forever.